Next is Superintendent's report, and action is necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond. As I get started, I would like to echo once again my appreciation for Executive Director Hudson. He and the School Improvement Council Network of South Carolina have had to find a way to still support school success during a time of COVID and so many changes in public education, and he and his leadership across the state have had that commitment. And I'd like to echo my appreciation of Chapin Middle School and all of our SICs. Our school improvement councils are a collective group of stakeholders, and I can say I've been fortunate to have attended Chapin Middles a couple of times, and hearing the active role that our student voices have on that committee, the staff, the families, the community, the partnerships, it's truly an exemplar of success of what school improvement councils can do when that kind of energy is synergized and focused on the vision and mission. And some of our schools in District 5 have successful SICs, and I'm fortunate that this year one of celebrations Chapin Middle. So once again, congratulations to Chapin Middle School. Executive Director Hudson, you are welcome to stay, but I suspect you have a business, so if you and the rest of your attendees would like to exit, there's a door in the back if you prefer, but otherwise you're welcome to stay for the duration of this evening. Tonight I'm going to start officially with our reentry, and this is report number 15. If you will notice, there is a recommendation that the administration has based upon information we have at this current time. This slide is one that the board has seen since last summer, so I will not go into details there, but we have 5 guiding principles that School District 5 has used throughout our phases of operation. We, of course, have recently hosted our second vaccination event. Mr. Beanbo is going to come forward and speak to that. Mr. Beanbo.
Thank you, Chair Hammond, board members, and Dr. Melton. We had a very successful vaccination partnership with Lexington Medical Center. As you know, we had 2 vaccination days on March 26th and April 16th. We had 668 people sign up and receive the vaccination. I do want to thank our school nurses, Dr. Harris, our D5 safety team, and communications for all of their assistance with this process. We want to thank Dr. Melton and the board for allowing us to give these vaccinations to our staff in District 5. And most importantly, we want to thank Lexington Medical Center for their partnership and their outstanding customer service that they did during this process. Thank you.
Mr. Beanbo, thank you for that. And you'll see the hashtag of VaccinateD5. If you'd like to see photographs, some more social media, use that hashtag for information. And I would like to also add a layer of appreciation for our Education Oversight Committee. Because of their use of e-learning and our pursuit of that, School District 5 was make sure that we did not have learning disrupted for those 2 days, and it took a burden off of our staff of those that wanted to have the vaccine. So it was truly a day of School District 5 culture coming to effect. Dr. Harris is going to get us started on the next portion of this presentation. This is a focus upon mask requirements. Due to some questions we heard from the board after the distribution of board packets last Thursday, we do have a couple of comments that we are inserting this evening that may not be seen with the verbal presentation, but we definitely, the physical presentation, but we do have a verbal update. Dr. Harris.
Thank you, Chair Hammond, members of the board, Superintendent, and our general community. On August 10th, 2020, the Board of Trustees did approve a policy, ADD, face coverings, which requires students and staff to wear face masks or face coverings in all district facilities as well as on school buses. We have since that time followed the guidance of CDC and DHEC and considered all the prevention strategies that have been employed by those agencies. Some of those strategies included the universal and current use of masks, physical distancing, hand washing and respiratory etiquette, cleaning and maintaining healthy facilities, and, of course, the continuance of contact tracing. With that, 2 priorities really stood out from these organizations and these health officials, and that is the universal and correct use of masks and physical distancing to the greatest extent possible. With that in mind, we have continued and consistently researched and maintained research with our CDC, maintained contact and communication with DHEC, as well as the State Department of Education. We've had conversations and discussions during our reentry meetings, as well as with our principals, and consistently, all entities agree that for the remaining 38 days of this school year, that we would continue to employ as a district those strategies and mitigating strategies that would support the demise, if you will, of the spread of COVID-19 here in School District 5. And with that having been said, we want to offer just an extended conversation, as Dr. Melton has alluded, by inviting Ms. Goggins here to just talk just a little bit in terms of an item that's not covered in print on tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. We have received some questions regarding guests at graduation and a request today and over the weekend for an update during tonight's board meeting. So as Dr. Harris said, you won't see slides for this update, but we felt this was an appropriate place since we coordinate with some of the same agencies on creating a plan for graduation. The first point we wanted to raise is that our graduation plans have been carefully thought out. For several months now, the district administration has been meeting on graduation ceremonies while coordinating with agencies. Those meetings include the communications team, Dr. Harris and his safety team, technology operations, our secondary education director, Mr. Presley, principals from all 4 of our high schools, and their graduation coordinators. In February, we received notification that graduation plans were to be submitted to the State Department of Education, the State Department of Health and Environmental Control, and the Department of Commerce for review under a gubernatorial order for events of 250 plus. We then invited individuals from those agencies to meet with us, so we ensured that the plan we submitted would be approved, and within a few days of that, we were told those plans no longer needed review. However, we did submit the plans, so we did have in writing our plans for graduation. Now, although the governor no longer requires this state agency to oversee the plans, it is still recommended that organizations with large gathering implement, quote, previously mandatory safety guidelines, and we will share a few of those now. Limiting attendance of large gathering to either 50% of the event space or fewer than 250 people. Face coverings of all employees, customers, patrons, suppliers, vendors, visitors, and other people in attendance at large gatherings. And, quote, reasonable steps to incorporate, implement, comply with, and adhere to any relevant sanitation, social distancing, and hygiene guidelines established by the CDC, DHEC, and any other state or federal public health officials. So again, these guidelines are still recommended, and we based our planning around these recommendations. Now, we looked at last year's safety measures and determined that many of those measures would remain in place under the current CDC guidelines. You've seen that update from Dr. Harris, so now let's talk about graduate allotments specifically. Last year, we allowed 4 guests per graduates after working with our facility team on configurations that would allow for proper social distancing. We, of course, heard requests last year for more guests, and we're hearing those again this year. And currently, we're trying to determine if adding guests is feasible, but there is some important background information we wanted the board and public to know. We did some research on our neighboring districts, and I confirmed this information earlier today, reaching out to Richland 1 and 2, Lexington 1, 2, 3, 4, and Kershaw County. The 2 Richland counties are permitting 4 guests per graduate, an increase over 2 guests last year. Lexington 2, 3, and 4 have not decided, but they hope to have announcements soon. Kershaw County is allowing for 4 guests, and Lexington 1 is allowing for 6. Now, I was not able to speak with my counterpart at Lexington 1 in detail today, but she did share with me that 2 of their high schools have much smaller graduating classes, and the 3 larger classes will be challenging. That was a quote from her. But they also have larger stadiums, so we did look into that. Again, no one is bypassing social distancing based off the conversations I had with districts. And most Midlands districts are permitting 4 guests currently. Now, we do know that there are some outliers around the state. Florence County School District 1 is allowing between 10 and 13 graduates. I contacted them to see how they are doing this, and their graduation ceremonies are being held off campus. And that facility, the Florence Center, is taking responsibility of creating the configuration for their guests. So this means the responsibility of ensuring that safety measure and social distancing is not on the district. It is on that private facility holding the graduation. The liabilities would also not be the district. Greenville County, which is allowing 4, 6, and 8 guests depending on the class size, is holding its graduation ceremonies at the Bon Secours Wellness Arena, which has a capacity of around 13 to 15,000, depending on the event that they're hosting. So they can accommodate more guests because the capacity of that venue is much larger. For context, we typically hold our graduation ceremonies at Colonial Life Arena, but after originally planning for that again this year, we made the decision to move the event back to stadiums because Colonial Life would only allow for 2 guests. And they were not giving us any certainty that that would be relaxed. We needed to move forward with our plans. The final note that we would provide on graduation is that increasing from 4 guests to 6 guests presents some logistical challenges that we are exploring ways to overcome. So for example, 6 guests would likely increase the number of vehicles, perhaps doubling the vehicles, and the impact of traffic flow since most cars hold about 5 people. So our safety team is coordinating with law enforcement and looking at traffic to address that concern. We are also looking at ways to overcome the issue of additional guests at the gates, entering and exiting, that would have to go through those safety checkpoints and metal detectors. Increasing the number of guests means more people entering and exiting. So again, we're exploring ways to overcome those challenges. To summarize, I will say first, we certainly know the importance of graduation, realizing that this is a milestone event for our students and their families. In a typical year, we would not restrict the number of guests, but this is not a typical school year, and operating during a pandemic has been anything but. Second, we want our families to know that we've been planning all year. We will live stream the event, and we will continue to explore what is feasible and what is doable in terms of guest numbers. Finally, we will always and have always been committed to providing a top-quality graduation ceremony for our students. And we know that these ceremonies need to be celebratory, they need to be safe, and they must give our graduates the experience they and their families have worked so hard for and deserve. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Melton to lead the ESSER funds portion of reentry.
Thank you, Ms. Goggins. I'm sure there'll be questions regarding that portion, but we felt it was important tonight to provide that update for the board. So this next portion of the reentry presentation focuses on ESSER funds, and some of this is a timeline reminder. And I don't know if everyone knows among the board that we have a website link that has our information to make it easy so that those that have questions can find our ESSER use of what's posted. But here's a recap of ESSER 1, 2, and projections of 3, what the state of South Carolina has received, what District 5 is planning to receive when we know, and of course timeline information that's helpful for all of our reminders. This next slide, of course, is intentional, the staff can tell you. We've captured faces of different events that have happened throughout this year, along with our theme of Know Thy Impact. For us to be at this place of operations and this place of success with 8 weeks to go, our staff is commendable, our students, and of course our families and their support. And for the board, they know so many of the specifics of things that we've dealt with. We appreciate the continued support of our board. Everyone has certainly had a contribution of the impact of operations of School District 5. This next slide is a new advisory committee that I have been working with. Some of these listed participants are here this evening. Hopefully you can see at a glance a variety of stakeholders have accepted the invitation. We did not include everyone that received an invitation, but we did include those that were able to accept the invitation and participate in these meetings that were actually held here at the center. Some of those guests are here this evening. I'd like to pause for them to stand so we can see some of the faces of the names that are listed. Thank you all so much for additional time and other responsibilities. I see Ms. Hammond is ready to applaud, so I want Ms. Hammond to have that opportunity. The conversation of these representatives that are listed on this slide have truly been uplifting and refreshing of perspectives of District 5's operations, and always an emphasis on what our students need and what's going to make our staff more successful and feel supported. So reaching back to ESSER 1 funds, I'd like to really draw your attention to the columns of committed and expended with the expenditure columns. School District 5 is, not all districts have reached success with these columns, but we have. We've had a commitment and expenditures, so notice the remaining balance thanks to the use of all of our folks that have had these funds available, and you see the different themes of how these funds have been used, reaching back to April 1st of 2021. And of course, when ESSER 1 funds were first distributed, we weren't sure that there were going to be additional funds. And fortunately, we have an update this evening to remind you of this slide. Rather than having a couple slides that I've shown you before, Ms. Goggins and team have condensed everything within one slide to show you the 15 categories. And you'll notice how she's highlighted the content of 12, 13, and 14 because those were new pockets or new buckets that you'll hear the Department of South Carolina's State Department refer to. These were new places of allowable use of funds. We broken based upon feedback of all advisories and definitely inputted by the advisory committee that has been newly created. We broken it down into 3 new themes. Learning, of course, to the far left, the mental wellness, and then facilities. And if you notice beneath those themes where we've connected some of the categories, because although you see learning is connected with category 12, really it incorporates other categories as well. Mental health, we're emphasizing category 10, but there are others. Facilities, categories 13 and 14. But if you put this slide up compared to this slide, so many more would match the needs that we've identified. And then you see how my priorities have been included with these areas because we feel like having things come together, the staff and the committees have heard me say, I won't have them rehearse with you, but all available funds. How we can make sure that all available funds are going towards the purpose of some areas that we've identified of the allowable usage of these funds. This evening, you're going to hear more information of these 3 themes that we've identified. Mr. Giuliano, our Chief Instructional Officer, is not able to be here this evening, but in his place, we have Dr. Slatton, our Director of Special Services. She's going to talk through the needs from instruction for ESSER 2 funds of how committees have given us suggestions. Dr. Slatton.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Hammond, board members, Dr. Melton, for letting me be here to share with you what we think is a really interesting and well-thought-out plan in support of instruction over the next year. In the summer, to focus on academic enrichment, there's several things that we have in place that we believe will support our educators, our parents, and our students. So I'm going to talk through several of those activities that we hope to implement this summer. The first is we want to give our teachers the opportunity to have some days to come in over the summer that will give them the opportunity to look at the data that will be coming in for the students that they'll be serving in this upcoming school year. That gives them an extra time, extra days to prepare for the students that they'll be serving when we go back to school in August. In addition to that, we want to make sure that our special education staff have the opportunity to conduct IEP meetings, transfer IEPs, any evaluations that need to be done, get all of that paperwork and those assessments done prior to school year starting so that when our kids walk into the school year, we are ready to rock and roll on day 1. In addition to that, we have lots of different academic enrichment opportunities that we have planned. For students that have been identified as a Tier 3 student through the South Carolina Department of Education, we plan to host a 1-week summer camp for each of those students. For students that have been identified as Tier 2, they will have the opportunity for virtual learning throughout the summer. For all of our students, they will continue to have access to their devices, their school-issued devices, and they'll continue to have access to software that we've been using throughout this year for academic support. In addition to that, we will be working with community partners to ensure that we've got social emotional opportunities embedded into our summer camps and our activities for our students. For our parents, we'll be hosting and providing for them trainings related to social emotional supports and activities that will be academic enrichment so they can do as a family throughout the summer. And in addition, for summer reading camp, we're really excited to continue our partnership with the University of South Carolina, where we'll be pulling in interns that will allow us to have additional staff at our summer reading camp for our 3rd graders that will enable us to reduce that student-teacher ratio for those students in that camp. So we've got all these great things that are planned for the summer. And then, of course, we'll have ongoing training and academic enrichment support throughout the 21-22 school year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Harris for mental health.
The next section, Dr. Harris is going to speak with us regarding mental health focus. And of course, we're projecting how the funds we are proposing to be used, but the board is well aware we've made it to the next benchmark of time. So since March of last year, it's been very difficult to forecast what a full semester or full academic year may look like. So this is what we know at this time. Dr. Harris with mental health.
Thank you. The Teen Health and Wellness publication, the most recent edition, shares this with us. The 1 in 6 teens live with a mental health condition. It further shares with us that students with mental health are more than twice as likely to drop out of school. And lastly, it says that 50% of all lifetime cases of mental illness begin by the age of 14. There's these kinds of data points that advise us that mental health and mental health supports are necessary and so very needed in School District 5 and throughout our community. And with that, you will hear in this presentation perhaps even some overlapping thoughts and themes that you've heard from instruction and perhaps some of the other areas as well. But there are really 4 categories that we want to emphasize when we think about mental health and mental health supports. And those are supports for our students, our parents, our families, staff rather, and the general community. And having said that, there are 6 bulleted items, 6 components that make up the mental health supports requests here. And those are based on professional development, which includes coaching and training opportunities, marketing and communications, which allows us to get the word out and to have data collections and information of that nature. Community connections, again, our partnerships, and perhaps even reading labs and mobile units that will help us with health screenings throughout the community. Educator wellness programs, really taking time and giving attention to our staff, making certain that they too are included in the mental health supports. Student and family initiatives, again, parenting programs that will allow parents to really help us as we continue to provide the very best for our students while we have them in schools. And then responsive services, those kinds of services and supports and educational supports that will allow us to really delve deeper into the details and specifics to really get the work done. There are really 4 areas that this ESSER 2 mental health supports does support, and that is with our students, our parents, our staff, and our community. And having said that, we will look at the 3rd and final item, and that is from Mr. Biedenbaugh at this particular time.
So Mr. Bema is going to focus on our operations.
Thank you, Chair Hammond, board members, and Dr. Melton. As Dr. Melton previously described, there are 3 new buckets, and in operations, we will be utilizing buckets 13 and 14 for operations, and 13 is facility repairs and improvements to reduce the risk of virus transmission and exposure, and 14 is the improvement of indoor air quality in our older facilities. We have been conducting operation assessments throughout the district in all of our facilities. We're still not quite through. We're almost through. We also have used the recommendations from the Medical University, MUSC, in some of our thought process, and then along with all of the committee input that we've had. So we will be conducting an indoor air quality study in our older facilities to get recommendations on how we can improve our indoor air quality. We will also be looking at reducing the risk of virus transmission, and this kind of relates to MUSC. So we'll be looking at different ways we can improve the front of our school and trying to reduce virus transmission. And then we also have to keep our PPE, personal protective equipment. We have sanitizing stations throughout the district. We want to maintain some funds to do that so we can keep our students safe. So, and the majority of our money will be spent on improving indoor air quality, is where most of our funds will be spent. Thank you, Dr. Melton.
So then we're now looking forward to ESSER 3 funds. We've captured some content here to make sure that the board and the community is aware. So I'll just pause to give everyone a chance to scan this content. Now, you see the budgeted amount as TBA. We've seen different numbers, so until we've gotten confirmation of the amount that School District 5 can expect to receive, we are hesitant to give any estimates at this point, but as soon as we have further information, we certainly will pass it along to the board and to the community. This timeline is one that is either impressive or overwhelming, depending on your perspective, because this summarizes some things that have related to ESSER funds, but this is not inclusive of all committees or all reentry meetings that have been held. Instead, it highlights some of the milestones of things that have occurred since March 20th, 2020. So this is here more for information and for landing points and, of course, how things have developed over time, but this is not inclusive of all the advisories, of all the participation, and all the conversations that have occurred within School District 5 since March 2020. Here we have outlined for you the reports that you have heard from Dr. Slatton, Dr. Harris, and Mr. Biedenbow, where we are estimating the projected amounts that we would like to focus our ESSER 2 funds upon. Of course, this is where we are at this time, not knowing exactly what may happen in the near future. So when you see this recommendation, you're going to see initial spending allocations. We, of course, are trying to forecast what may happen for School District 5 and for the future, but until we have more information or until we experience events, it's very difficult to say with certainty what may happen. We believe that these initial recommendations are sustainable. Our committee that was created uniquely for this reason were very celebratory that many of the things that we've highlighted here for you this evening are things that are already occurring within School District 5 that we can enhance. There are others that we feel that we can accelerate, specifically for those that have to do with operations and facilities. So with that, Ms. Hammond, I'll close for any questions that the board may have regarding any of our reentry conversations of presentation number 15.
What I would like to do, if this will suit the board, I put this into subjects. I think you addressed first mask, then we got an update from Ms. Goggins about graduation, and then we've got the ESSER funds, and I looked at that in learning, mental health, and facilities. So I made my questions along those subjects. So what I will do is I will begin with her first subject, if there's any conversation or any questions for her administration about masks. Ms. Blackburn-Hines.
I'll kick off the fun conversation about masks. So I appreciate Dr. Harris identifying that we have 38 days left of school. And I know that this is a big conversation among parents and students, and it has been a crazy year. And we have finally gotten to the point where our teachers have had the opportunity to receive a vaccination. There are studies, teachers that have wanted to receive a vaccination have received a vaccination. I'm just going to throw this out there regarding the State Department's mask mandate. That policy that was implemented in August, it didn't have an end date. I know that they are starting to have that conversation now in the State Department, but our parents don't know that. They haven't received that information, and there's a lot of gossip and lack of information, so they are frustrated. So I'm glad that we can clear the air with that today. I would like to say, just from my perspective, I have talked to many parents and many teachers, and there are a lot of very strong opinions on this. But at the end of the day, we are in a different situation than we were this time last year. And I strongly feel like we need to start having the conversation about what next year looks like, and the fact that we need to have the opportunity for a choice. That is not to say that, masks should be completely eliminated, but a mandate should. We need to have the choice, and that conversation should start happening for next school year. If we're talking about the next 38 days and our policy versus the state mandate policy, I know that there is a lot of concern about the fact that we do not necessarily have the flexibility in our policy that the state policy has regarding students outside at recess, wearing masks on the equipment, which I know that just started this week, and I know a lot of parents are really happy about that. I would just like to have that conversation among the board so that it's not everything happening. I'm hearing that things are happening on social media. I stay off of social media, But we've received a lot of emails back and forth, so I would just like to see how the rest of the board feels about that.
Before I call on someone else, I would like to clarify, and this is something I talked to Dr. Milton about. I reviewed the policy that we did pass in May, and I can assure you the language is in there for discretionary decisions made by teachers and within the classroom and at recess. So there is flexibility in the wording of our policy. Now, since it's left with teachers, that may vary, as we've talked about, but I think it's very important that we all hear, that the public hears from the board about this, because it is a lot of conversation. I know there's some people that feels like this has worked well. There's only 38 days left. District 5 has flexibility. If teachers are not allowing that, the wording says discretionary to the teacher and the principal in charge. I'm just going to speak to this. As a teacher, I teach in another district. My children can take them off at recess. They're at middle school, and I'm in charge of that. And they also, in my room, apart from each other, if they need to take it off to talk and answer questions, that's my discretionary decision. So I think we need to clarify that as we look at 38 days. Do we want to make some new policy, or do we want to, if we as a board think what we have is sufficient? So that's a good question for anybody tonight. Matt, let me call on everybody, Ms. Hines, before I come back to you. Mr. Hogan, I'm going to go down the line.
Yeah, Jen, thank you for bringing me into the conversation. Dr. Melton, I'd heard a lot of questions, or actually comments regarding to contract tracing. Out of curiosity, does our district, are we tracking the number of students that are obviously out on quarantine, but are we following up with them to determine a positive test from that quarantine, and therefore do we have that number to look at?
I'll ask Dr. Harris to be engaged with that. Of course, confidential information of health depends on whether the parent chooses to share with us the information of their child. Dr. Harris, what would you like to share in addition to the dashboard?
I would say, in addition to the dashboard, which is very active and remains very active, that Dr. Milton is absolutely right. It's based on the information that we did receive from parents. But our nurses are very dutiful and very diligent in following up with our parents, and so that does occur. I do not have a number or data points in which to share with you at this particular time, only to simply say that there is follow-up from our nurses where and when parents make that information available.
Okay, so when it is available, though, we are keeping that data and we're following it to determine kind of our impact regarding a positive case.
Based on whatever's received.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Gardner.
Thank you. I just would like to see, I feel like in our school district right now, we're following the mask mandate very strictly, and our policy does have a lot of ability to be more relaxed, and so I would like to see us using that. I mean, it says here, I've got it in front of me, it says that there's exceptions granted at the discretion of the superintendent or his or her designee, which we assume meant the teacher or the school principal. And I think based on the schools and based on the needs of the students and based on the teachers, I would like for them to have more flexibility, because I really, when we did this policy last year, I felt like we, if you want to go back and watch it, it was very time-consuming and exhaustive, but I had tried to fight for the ability to have a choice for the teachers and so that they could do their jobs and also to create the environment they need. So I'd like to see that, because I feel like I'm still hearing that they still have to wear their mask at recess, even though it specifically says here they don't have to at outdoor recess. It says that in our policy. And also it says when seating at the discretion of the teacher. I think we're not always we're not allowing that flexibility that's already in our policy. We're already stricter than what's required of us from the state. And just as to agree with Ms. Blackburn-Hines, I agree that we need to start the process of amending this policy to make it more of a choice, and the process takes 3 meetings, it takes a discussion and 2 readings for us to do that, and I wanted to just say that that would be something that I'm going to help advocate for and alongside Ms. Hines, and also just to know that we feel that our children need to come first, and that we've done all the mitigation, and we've we have to move forward from here and put them first. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Mr. Lovelace.
I'm kind of going to piggyback on that because I remember the discussion we had and it went on for quite some time with the superintendent and her designee, because I think I was the one that said, I think that means classroom teacher. But anyway, I just want to say that whatever we can do that would keep us still within the state mandates and the federal mandates, that we should do it. The other thing I wanted to say is I did a little homework with some folks at the state, and there's another district that went, I don't know how else to say it, but went rogue. And so there was discussion about whether or not that, since they totally abrogated what the state wanted, that were they qualified for the ESRA funds. And I don't know the answer to that, but anyway, I just want to make sure, that for, we beg indulgence of our students and our teachers and our parents, that for the remainder of this year, if that policy stays in place, I think it would be a shame for us to risk anything so that we could have better air quality. We've talked about that tonight, in the near future. And I just want to make sure that we do everything that we can to be elastic, but we stay within the state bounds.
Thank you. Save the best for last. No, I'm just kidding.
That's it.
Well, first of all, I want to say I share everybody's frustration with this. I mean, we're all sick of it. I hate wearing masks. Women that wear makeup, you hate wearing masks. Your makeup's always on the inside of your mask. I haven't worn lipstick in 12 months. And I feel bad for kids. I mean, you see little kids that are 5 years old, and I wonder what it does to their mental well-being when they can't see faces and whatnot. That said, I mean, the reality is we can't legally change this policy, as Ms. Gardner said, for 3 more meetings. So I would ask, let's put it on the agenda for the very next meeting so we can fix it for next year. We don't have time, honestly, to fix it this year. And even if we did, we're so close to the end of the year. There are variants coming out. Teachers haven't really gotten the benefit of the second vaccine yet. I say let's fix it for next year. But I will say for this year, the language says the board authorizes the superintendent, his or her designee, to amend these requirements as necessary to meet health and safety guidelines. Well, I think we do have to meet those guidelines. We might not agree with those guidelines, but if we don't follow them, I think we risk liability and other issues for our district. So, but what I would say is, in this policy, his or her designee is not really clear. Is it the teacher? Because if you go back to the student place where it says they can take it off, it doesn't actually say teacher. It says superintendent or his or her designee. So I guess I would just ask Dr. Melton if it's possible to make it very clear, because there's only 2 areas where we disagree, where we're tighter than the state guideline, and one of them is teachers wearing it. In the state guidelines, teachers can actually take off their mask if they're far enough away. So could we loosen up there? And then the other would be could we loosen up, make it clear to teachers that if you're comfortable that your kids are far enough away from each other, even if it's for 5 minutes for a mask break, make sure that they know they can do that. So that's, I guess, I can't tell Dr. Melton what to do here, but I would ask if that's possible.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. And all this feedback is so helpful because it helps us look at things holistically. I've been fortunate to have been in all schools, not seen all students at recess because, as Ms. Blackburn-Hines said, playgrounds recently reopened. But I can tell you there are places where children are abiding by just this of recess without wearing masks. Those things are happening. But of course, oftentimes we hear of examples where the staff member may not feel safe or the staff member is aware of something where more protective measures are put into place. Some classrooms are more filled than others where there can be space. Of course, as Ms. Gardner alluded to earlier, when this was passed back in August of 2020, policy ADD, face coverings is the title for those that may be looking it up this evening. The board, of course, is very much aware of it. When this was passed, we were still looking at a 6 feet. And of course, the CDC, with any adjustments and changes, this has given us the flexibility. And as you're both Ms. Huddle and Mr. Lovis are describing the flexibility, we're so close to the finish that one change of ingredient or variable right now, we don't want it to disrupt the end of the year being a strong conclusion. So I appreciate the conversation, reminders. We definitely can work on the communication, reviewing the portion of students and reviewing the portion at the end under the discipline section. The last full sentence, we'll work on that to make sure that we have a refreshed conversation, because now we've reached the norm where this is a habit of operation, which saddens me, but it also encourages me that we've got to this place. But we could definitely go back to make sure that we work with communication with our site administrators, that they can work on communicating with teachers, and for that supervisory that's occurring with our students.
Thank you. And I would just say I did some homework too, and I know that the State Department of Education says that CDC and DHEC, they really are recommendations and guidelines, but that a school board does have the flexibility within a board to make a policy about masks. I would tell you that. I think the only thing they told me they control about money would be our buses, because they own the buses. But honestly, within the schools, we can make policy about a mask. I see Mr. Hogan. Yeah, sure. I was just going to go to the next subject, but not till we finish this.
Well, and this actually is more directed towards you, Chairwoman Hammond. For the public and myself as well, can we get some clarification? Are we positive we're going to have this on the discussion agenda for the next meeting?
You can count on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That good? On that one. Now, I thought, let's go, if there are any questions, and I sure appreciate your hearing us about graduation, because I know that's on the mind of so many people, and I really appreciate you having the verbal presentation for us. I had a couple of questions on that, but I want the board to have it first. Anything about graduation? Ms. Hines?
I have a question about some numbers and how that works with regards to how many fans are allowed in the football stadium during football games or any other athletic events versus how many spaces are available or allotted for graduation seats? And is there like a lottery system? So if you have say one family is going to use 2 seats and not all 4 seats, is there like a place to put the remaining tickets where families that are, blended families that have more family members that would like to attend would be able to attend? How does that work?
Ms. Blackburn-Hines, what I appreciated you ask, how does that work? Because I cannot measure how much time our staff at the district level and also the school representatives have already put towards graduation. And last year, it was 24 hours on site to make sure that equipment was not vandalized. And so I appreciate that you're asking how some things work, because there are so many complications that go into this. I did not ask Director Presley to be here this evening because I didn't know this was going to come up. He works directly with the high school league. And so I can tell you, at that time of the year, we were getting prepared for fall sports. We had to work closely with the league to make sure that plans were submitted. So every high school had to submit their plan through the athletic director, inclusive of boosters, of how we were going to situate the seating area for events. That, of course, has been monitored throughout the year. Last year, when I hear you say about the number of available seats of a system of lottery, last year it was a graduate and 4 guests. So whoever walked in with the graduate was allowed to come in, because part of our preparation for last year was we actually had Mr. Wiseman and safety officers went out to count how many parking spaces we had at every stadium. Because once you know how many parking spaces you had that you could have available parking, that then dictates another piece of the component or the ingredients that go into this planning. So many people that are asking for increase of tickets with an emphasis solely on CDC and DHEC are forgetting about the operational piece that Ms. Goggins explained this evening in a very condensed way, Ms. Goggins, because you took lots of meetings and conversation to try to present it to the public so that they could hear it. So when it looks at capacity, that's another variable that goes into it. So this year, as far as I know with updates, Ms. Goggins has led those conversations recently. Ms. Goggins, are you at a place now that requiring the guests, because there was conversation about not requiring the guests to walk in with the graduates. So if you could update with what we're looking at for this graduation as opposed to what we did last year that was different for the class of 2020.
Certainly, Dr. Melton. And our principals and Mr. Presley led that conversation and decided that they would again let the graduate be the ticket, so our guests will be arriving with our graduates. They also decided that 4 tickets per graduate would be across the board, no matter what our class size would be for our high schools as well. So that's how that works. It's 4 seats, whether the graduate needs it or not, 4 guests per graduate.
Does that answer your questions?
That answer your question?
So are the same amount of people that are allowed to go to a football game on both sides of the stadium are they going to be allowed to go to graduation? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I don't have Mr. Presley
Okay.
I have not compared those numbers myself. We have looked at how much space the graduates are going to need, how much the faculty may need. So as far as spectators, there may be fewer spectators because faculty is included.
Okay.
So if you look at the number of ticketed parents that a graduate may bring of their family, once you take out the graduate number being there and then you add in the faculty that may be on the field or may be seated in the stands someplace, all those kinds of things affect the number of people that we are allowing in. That may not be solely CDC, DHEC, it may be a piece of the operational system of District 5 using our available space to host these. There was discussion of having it at the largest stadium, and our representatives were very clear that it was important to our students, and our student advisory echoed this when I met with them last, of having it at their schools rather than going to the largest venue where there was more space that we could offer for parking and for seating. So I can make sure that we make note of that question, and we'll follow up with the board on that, comparing the numbers for athletic events with graduation, total allowable admission or entrance, Ms. Goggins.
I think the point I would add is we are maximizing the seating. We work very closely with our Director of Facilities, Mr. Cannon, to make sure that we can get as many people as possible. We even utilized the ground level for graduation last year, and we're looking to do that again this year.
Okay, I appreciate it.
I'm going to mix it up and go this side first. Ms. Huddle.
Question, and if you pick the largest graduating class at the smallest stadium, what percentage of the stadium would be filled with 4 tickets?
That's a math problem.
Well, the reason why I ask is because I think Ms. Goggins said that the guideline was 50%. And so, I mean, let's face it, what we're all trying to do here is figure out how we can get more kids, more people in there. That's the bottom line. So I guess my question is, you know, is it possible that the number's higher than 4? Because if it is, let's figure out a way to do it. And then my other question kind of related to that, and I realize this is a lot of work for people, but I partly wonder if there's a way to actually issue physical tickets, because I think the lottery is a great idea, but it might be too hard. But if you have physical tickets and Ms. Hines only needs 3 and I need 5, she might give me 1, free lunch or something, I don't know. But anyway, I guess I would just ask is, before it's too late, can we do everything possible to figure out how we might get more, whether it's 5 or 6?
Along that line, Dr. Milton, before you answer that, because this kind of goes with that, I also think that we should look at the fact it's very different than last year. We have a lot of people that have taken the shot, and last year was, you know, in the middle of really not understanding as much as we understand now. So I would think for sure it ought. And another question I asked the State Department today is individual districts can decide about, because the governor has lifted the amount of people that can be in a large area. So I think that's something we should at least explore, along what Ms. Huddle is saying, a way to increase the number of people that can come to graduation.
And I would point out, I know that some of the comparisons were like Bon Secours, but that's indoors, and we're outdoors, so I think if anything, we could have more people.
I do too. Yeah. Now we're going to let you take that out.
So I'm not sure that I don't know that I heard a specific question, but here's what I would, notes that I've taken, Ms. Hammond. I heard a question about physical tickets. There, of course, would be, I lost my ticket or I left it at home on the dresser. I mean, real life happens, right? I mean, how many times have I left different things at home and I had to try to go back? But, so that's an issue. And then I think through the cost of it, we've talked about electronic tickets. And the reason we decided to stay with the graduate as a ticket is it worked last year. Our staff has been accustomed to managing those kinds of things because we've had that experience already. But if there isn't support, if the board is suggesting that we look at something different, we'll need to make sure that we have the funds for that, Ms. Goggins, whether it's electronic or what that may look like. So I've made note for us to revisit that conversation. And of course, with every meeting that we have with principals and senior class sponsors, these conversations continue. And I encourage our parents of the class of 21 to stay abreast of our communications that when there are changes. The question about the largest graduating class and the smallest, I don't know the answer to that. We'll have to look at that. And of course, Spring Hill rotates. So Spring Hill made the suggestion last year after they graduated at Chapin High School. They are this year graduating from Irmo High School. So they're rotating sites as to where they graduate, and that too is a component of how we're scheduling and how we're organizing. And then of course, we've got graduation ceremonies that start at 8 a.m. So how early does our staff need to get there to open the gates to let people in earlier than maybe what we had intended to do to make sure that graduation can run smoothly and everyone is seated on time? Because imagine you're still in line to go in through the entrance procedures and your child's name was just called and you miss them walking across the stage because when you arrived there wasn't available parking. All those components that are not exemplary customer service that we have to think through. So I'm taking notes of the feedback that you have to make sure we revisit these conversations, and it is probably not as easy as most imagine it to be. I will say that.
Bliss, question?
You can, Dr. Melton, if you want to throw your shoe at me after I ask this, I think I'm young enough to still dodge it. But anyway, do you think there's any way that that could be some kind of ticket exchange, like, you know, Ms. Huddle and Ms. Hines have been talking about the numbers of tickets, where if somebody were only going to use 2, that somebody else could reserve that maybe? And
We know that happened last year, Mr. Lovelace, because we know that there were guests last year that if I needed 2, I had 2 available, that those 2 guests knew my family well enough, they walked in with me. So it worked last year, I can tell you that. With our talk of paperless tickets the way we've done with some athletic events, we know that's going to delay the entrance where we have to actually scan you in and the line's going to build, but we will definitely look at the efficiency. We've already identified the number of gates that we can have open with the number of available staff that we have. So we will definitely revisit the ticket conversation.
and to address the questions about the square footage and the number, I remember last year I sat down and took the square footage, being a contractor and this estimating and so forth. I sat down and looked at that, and it seemed like at the time that Chapin, I just did the Chapin High School Stadium because I didn't know the square footage of anywhere else. But it seemed like with the graduating class that they had, and I want to say that was around 400, okay. Well, anyway, it seemed like that there was enough room for 4+ when I did the numbers there. You know, and maybe it got to 6, but you know that was that was in the range. So.
Well, I remember telling Mr. Cannon to get out his sliding rule, his project, all those math tools that he used as he got the numbers prepared for us. And you know, I trust the work that our staff put into it. But of course, this year with social distancing having a different expectation than last year, we can certainly revisit that.
Ms. Gardner, anything on graduation?
Yeah, I just want to echo that I appreciate that the school district is making this a priority because I feel like it is important that we allow more in if we can, and I appreciate that there's been a lot of thought going into it. But I just have to put a plug out there for paper tickets. If I knew it was priceless, I would make sure that I had my ticket. And I think people understood, I mean, I think they do. I think everyone knows that those seats are priceless. I think they'll take it seriously, and I don't think you'll have as many lost tickets as we might consider. And if that makes it easier to hand out, or if it makes it a lot cheaper, I think that would be a way to do it. I would advocate for that over ticket list, because the ticket list takes forever to get in anywhere, so.
Mr. Hogan?
Nothing really that anybody hadn't already said, but Dr. Melton, to kind of echo everybody else, I do agree. If numbers isn't something we can look to increase from 4 to 6 or 4 to 8, whatever you're looking at, I do think that having paper tickets and giving the ability to transfer is a good idea, and I'll leave it at that.
Ms. Hines?
I'll just close this conversation out by saying thank you. I know that this is, the logistics of pulling this off is very complicated, and I know that we're throwing to add more people in that, and just thank you. We recognize that you are working very hard, and thank you for being willing to have the conversation with our student leaders and our parents and the board.
Well, if I may, Ms. Hammond, it's easy to get information lost in the shuffle because there's such a volume to present. School District 5 was the district in the Midlands last year that had in-person graduation with 4 tickets. School District 5 has shown a commitment. We deliberately did not choose a Colonial Life Arena, and we were among the first chosen not to go there because they allowed 2. So although it may look like to the community there's problems, I would like to offer assurance School District 5 has proven that this is a milestone event of which our families and students should be celebrated, and that we need to be able to manage successfully for the variables that the general public is not required to attend to, that we are responsible for. So, Ms. Hammond, I appreciate the opportunity that I could weigh in.
Thank you, and we appreciate your staff. And I echo what Ms. Hines said. It's never easy planning something this big and this important, and that all of a sudden has been done a certain way for so many years, and all of a sudden, whammo, you got to come up with something brand new and still make it as important as it is to those people that have had to give up a lot of things in 2020. Okay, so we got mass, graduating, now the ESSER funds. If you don't mind, I'd like to do it the same way. I'd like to take the first about lost learning, and that's one of my pets. I have some questions, but mine will be last. Anybody with any question on the lost learning? And it's this slide. I think they put it back up. Ms. Hull? Ms. Hines?
So my question regarding the lost learning items on this, I think that it looks very well thought out. I'm just going to ask a question about where we are on implementing these items on here. I know last summer when we received money and we had to figure out how we were going to do leap days and all of those things in the middle of getting the money, the time frame to prepare was not like we are now. So as we look at, that we're budgeting $1.4 million for this summer, how are we preparing to make sure that in 38 days when school's out and we have that 6-week window that we're ready to rock and roll and our teachers are prepared and there will be a seamless transition between the spring semester and the summer semester?
The answer to that is complicated, and it depends.
Okay.
So if you look at the first item regarding the stipends for teachers' lesson plans, we have not communicated that to teachers because we did not know if the board would be in support of the plan that we've drafted for you to review. Other things such as parent training, you see no additional cost because those kinds of things are already planning to go on this year with continuation. The bottom bullet, just the one above the bold of summer reading camp, I don't know if that was picked up on, but our unique professional development school district system, the first of its kind in the nation, I had to plug that in. We're expanding the opportunity to give teaching candidates the opportunity to come in and work with our students because we know that our teachers are going to have a shorter summer after an unusual year, that more teachers are likely not going to take on a long-term commitment of something like summer reading camp, which is required by state law that we offer for remediation to those readers. So it depends on which item that's going to be on here. We offer special education services throughout the summer, but this plan will allow Dr. Slatton and team to supplement. And if you look at the Tier 3 significant, Tier 2 moderate, those are some of the categories that the State Department has has named those levels of students so that we can start identifying which students have differing needs for learning. The idea of learning loss, I feel like I need to say on behalf of the committee and always on behalf of our teachers, that's what the federal government has named this. There may be some families that feel like there has been a learning loss, but we've not experienced summative assessment, so we don't know how this year is going to measure to previous years. We may see learning acceleration, we may see continuity of performance, but we know that we definitely have some disruption, and we want to be as mindful, which is why we're projecting the 21-22 school year. But you don't see the number of bullets there the way you do for summer because it's farther away, and we're not quite sure what kind of variables may change between now and then. So this is tentative, but some things have already been planned that can be sustained.
I appreciate that. I think that it's a great idea to use teacher candidates during this process, and I would think that it might help the district with recruitment.
Any other question? I'll have, if I might ask mine, Dr. Melton. That was one of my biggest questions, is how we would evaluate each student's individual needs, which also can go in when we talk about mental health, but especially learning. Are we, and I also wanted to ask for parents, is there an avenue where parents can sign up or have a place to communicate their determination that they might see at home, in helping them with homework, especially elementary children. Middle and high school tell you they don't have any. But I do want to hear from your perspective how parents can guide their child to the right help and be, active in it. And I know you've got the parent training, but I'm still saying for that parent at home that's like, who do I go talk to? I can just tell my child is really behind in math, or maybe it's reading, and how we'd evaluate that. I thought that would be good for parents to hear.
Yes, ma'am. I always remind parents, of course, of third 9 weeks, those report cards, always be in communication with your teacher of record. That's always important. In touch with your school counselor, whoever you may have the relationship with, to express concerns that you have about your child's performance. We, of course, MAP testing is something School District 5 has done for a number of years, and this year with our students that are in the 5 program, we have required that they come in to actually be tested at school so that we could see how students are performing. We want to make sure that we have a good grasp on our students' needs, and those parent conferences that have been different this year, I would just encourage that parent of the way that they feel most comfortable with the person they feel most comfortable with to reach out to that person. What was the other question you asked? I wrote down parent request.
Well, mine was that's with parents, and then how I guess you'll identify by MAP testing.
Identify and evaluate.
Okay.
So we have MAP testing, of course. We have the require test that the end of the year requires. We, of course, have, depending on the level of the class, our completer rate here at the center, how those students perform on national assessments. Are they really summative? I won't go into my belief system on that, but it definitely is for reporting information. We have those kinds of things coming up, and then, of course, we always have the teacher observation, the formative assessments, things that teachers are always on point and mindful of. So there are many things that we're doing this year that are consistent with what we've done previous years, but there are some additional challenges this year of how we're assessing students. If you've not had the opportunity for more of the hands-on demonstration because of equipment or your choice of modality, or because during that time you may have been hybrid versus face-to-face, there have been challenges that our instructional staff have met, but we always go back to the curriculum standard and making sure that students are as best prepared as they can be. If I could draw attention to some of the community partnerships where you see $150,000 there, some of the activities that we've designed for events like this are very emotional, connected to get students in together, having that social interaction. We're going to slide in without them realizing that they're doing some academic growth as well, but we're certainly not going to say this is going to be an enrichment camp, but it will be learning and socializing, learning together that are being embedded with events that we have. It will not be all social play, and it's going to stretch over the gamut of our students and where they are with their development socially and emotionally, to include high school students, and some trips that we can get them on, some exposure that we can get to them into the community, and always with an awareness of CTE with our career development and their exposure to potential careers for the future.
Are all these programs elementary through high school?
Yes, ma'am, they're inclusive across the span of early childhood, elementary, intermediate, middle, and high school.
And I had one more question for stipends for teacher lesson planning. That would be, that would be optional, which teachers would like to do that?
That is optional, using new materials that the State Department has of online help me name, is it the Hub, Dr. Slatton? The department has Instruction Hub, I remember the Hub. The instructional hub that the department has, a repository, will allow our teachers to spend time going through it, but it is not required for an additional 2 days of contract. It is truly optional for the teachers to experience, and it gives them a chance to go through to see what's out there to assist with their planning rather than their creation. But they could use the available time to review what the department has made available with lessons that have been created into units of study that are available to teachers in South Carolina.
And so it could be virtual or in person? It'd go either place?
We've not gotten to those details yet, but definitely 2 days of a recorded time of engagement.
Thank you. You know I have to have all my questions for my teachers.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Huddle.
I actually do have a question. As far as, particularly with the Tier 3 significant, are there obstacles to getting those children in for that, transportation or anything else? And if so, are you guys talking about ways to overcome those?
Mr. Wiseman knows that I've got him working on transportation. He's giving me a double thumbs up. Some of the obstacles that any student can experience during the summer is, am I going to stay with a relative for the summer and not going to be at home? Does my family have vacation plans? Am I watching my younger siblings if I'm an older student? So those kinds of things will still, of course, happen this year. But we don't want to hear any student say that transportation is the obstacle for them to participate with the summer activity. So we would like to make sure that Mr. Wiseman has ample time to get prepared, to create those routes, and to make sure that we have available drivers to offer transportation for those that are interested and those that can commit to participating.
Thank you. Our next would be mental health. Mr. Lovelace.
Dr. Melton, I think I can remember, seems like eons ago, but we had, one of your goals was to have one mental health worker for every 2 schools. Am I right? Okay, and I've long lauded you for that, because I think that's where we need to be. And my question was whether we could, I know this is one-time money, that we're getting from ESSER, but how does that help us get further to our goal of having mental health workers? I'm sure there must be some way we could connect the two.
Yes, sir. I appreciate your continued interest, Mr. Lovelace, with this. And unfortunately, I am behind my own timeline because the telepsych services that we recruited schools to participate with have had another delay with getting that successfully consistent. So there'll be an upstart to get it going, and then something will happen with staffing changes and outside of School District 5's responsibilities, but in partnership for sure. We have made the recommendation for these funds not to have recurring commitment. But that has definitely been a conversation because we do need additional assistance, especially during this time. But our concern is if we put in some recurring cost, how might the board and the district sustain that price tag over the course of future budgets, and what may have to give if this continues to be needed. So you're going to see with this slide how we are suggesting to do the train the trainer model, some field studies to actually go out to places where our staff can see for themselves rather than hearing about it, go and experience that. And of course, the marketing, so many things we have discovered during this time. Our parents, as Ms. Hammond asked earlier, simply don't know of some things that we offer. So we feel like this marketing line that we've inserted here will allow us to promote programs that we already have in different ways to reach the audience of those that may be disengaged from School District 5 or new to School District 5. So you see the telehealth there for the third bullet, the community connections. We continue to work on that to try to find those partnerships that can assist us with telehealth. And Dr. Harris and Ms. Rawls are likely tired of hearing me say, I want a mobile lab. I want a mobile health lab so that our students can have health care, visiting their communities, visiting our schools, and what kind of funds may be out there that we could pursue. So, Mr. Loveless, we're not on target with that 1 to 2. We're behind the timeline of what I had hoped to be, but not because of lack of effort. But when the pandemic struck, resources from our partners were needed in other places, so that has disrupted the timeline of School District 5.
Any other mental health question? I had one. Dr. Harris was explaining it, that most mental health, if they're problems, they show up around the age of 14. I think, Dr. Harris, I wrote that down right. It may just be from my own experience, but after he told me that as being a data, I was thinking about middle schools. It is really where I think so many of these mental problems pop up, and I didn't know whether you'll have some discretion of whether or not, you know, you want to be fair with all schools, I mean, all age children, but if that is a place, you know, to highlight, I was thinking about that because I see that myself every day. And then my other thing with the amount of money, will some of that be, I mean, I'm reading that, but I'm assuming, would we have access with some of that money to actually have, where did I see it? It was it a mobile? I thought I read that. Yeah. Where they'd have a lab and mobile units. Would that have access to maybe not only psychologists and counselors, but even a psychiatrist? Or that's too expensive to bring that to the children?
We have not found those commitments, but with our PDSD partnership, we're trying to reach the university to reach into all colleges within the PDSD agreement beyond the College of Education, that appropriate colleges within the university system we can include there. So it depends on the partnerships we can create with either healthcare already in our community or through the university of the colleges that they have under the university umbrella.
That'd be great. Well, it's great that you've highlighted that. Mental health is, I think, one of the rising places that we have got to concentrate and help our kids. We've got to, before they're adults. The last one is facilities, not last, but on this presentation. And that way we've gotten to speak to each thing. Facilities. I bet I know who would like to say something. Mr. Lovelace.
After you thrust this into my, into my hand. I guess this is a point in time that you would like to make that?
No, not that. It's about facilities, but that's down here.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm
I
sorry,
messed
I
you
got
up.
the wrong place.
No, I mean, are there any questions on her presentation about facilities? Anybody? Ms. Huddle? Okay, we're good. All right, then we are ready for your second item.
Ms.
under
Hammond, I think that there's a recommendation for action on this. So can I make a motion that we approve the administration's initial spending allocations plans for ESSER II funds as outlined in this report?
Do you need that? Isn't that what we need? Do you need that tonight to approve that?
Yes, ma'am.
It would help you.
I was under the understanding that the board wanted to see our plan, so if it doesn't require board support, that you've seen what we plan to do, but we made the recommendation in the event the board did want to take action. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a second? I see a second, and I think we've discussed it in detail.
I just have a question because there's a policy on here. I'm sorry. I'm looking for it.
In the reentry?
Yeah, second reading and approval of proposed new board policy ESSER funds. I just don't know how this relates to that.
You're talking about which number?
It's number 15.
Yeah, I think that's where we were going to have that.
We have
Dr.
to.
Miller.
Oh. Ms. Rawls, would you like to speak to the item that's coming up for preview for number 15, Exhibit F?
Yeah, she just took it out of place.
Yes, ma'am. Chair Hammond, members of the board, Dr. Melton, we will be providing that policy for approval later tonight. What we're needing with this recommendation is just the board's approval so that we can go ahead and get the budget in line for the ESSER II funds. So the policy is just, I'm not using the word generic, but it is an overarching policy where we're looking for more detailed information in this recommendation.
So that's what you're talking about under action number 15?
Yes, ma'am.
So you still need us to approve
We need you to
this.
approve these numbers in the different priorities that have been identified in this presentation. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, in this one. Okay, so we are okay. We're good. All right. So we had a motion and we had a second. Any discussion?
I guess I just want to make sure that, I'm sorry, I'm getting too loud. I want to make sure that we still follow so there's sections of the procurement code, 710, that allow the board to approve certain exemptions, and a lot of consulting type things are in there. So I guess this is more of a question than a comment, is if we approve this, but we want to hire XYZ Consulting, are we thereby approving them too, or would that be a separate approval under the procurement code?
No, ma'am, we're not even to the place yet of having consultants that we have sought to use. Now, of course, those that have been directly involved with our literacy program, of course, there's likely to be a partnership there that we would suggest for continuity purposes. But this we're looking at to be the initial spending, and it's likely we're going to ask for an adjustment anyway later. Once we've gone into the summer of 21, depending on how many students and families participate, that's one example of how this could change over the course of time, which is why we're trying to focus on short increments of time at this place.
Okay, so we're ready to vote on that motion in a second. All those in favor of the motion of approving this preliminary plan, raise your hand. And that is 6 in approval with no no's. All right, so now we are Human Resource Report, update, and information regarding Kelly Services contract and substitute teachers. Thank you. We welcome Dr. Turner.
Board Chair Hammond, board members, and Dr. Melton, this presentation is in response to a motion made at the March 1st board meeting that the district continue our existing processes as it relates to contracting for substitute teachers, pending more information on that process from the superintendent and her staff at the first board meeting of April. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide the board a comprehensive look at staffing services for substitutes. During the presentation, we'll present a timeline, how Kelly Services works with our district, differences between the roles of certified and non-certified substitutes, rates of pay for substitutes, and possible options to resolve some of the concerns raised by the board. This presentation is in collaboration with Ms. Marty Rawls, our Chief Finance Officer, and Attorney Ashley Story, so they will be joining me at different times of the presentation. The first item you see in the presentation is in timeline, and the purpose is to, again, provide that comprehensive overview of how we came to use staffing services in the district. Before 2009, the district employed a full-time classified employee to manage subs, and we used a system called SubFinder at the time, and substitutes were employees of the school district. As a result of subs being our employees, what you'll notice is that there is a board policy, GCG, and there was also an administrative rule in 2009 about part-time substitute professional staff employment. And ultimately, that administrative rule allowed for certificate rates of pay or extended rates of pay for any substitute that served greater than 10 days. The purpose for board policy and administrative rule GCG was it provided a way to incentivize certified teachers to serve in the role as substitute teachers. And I'll show you in just a bit how a certified teacher differs from a daily sub who is not certified. But ultimately, by recruiting certified teachers and incentivizing higher rates of pay, it served to benefit our students by giving students continuity of instruction necessary for continued academic success. Then you'll notice on your timeline in 2010, the Affordable Care Act was passed by our federal government. That Affordable Care Act increased the district's liability in regards to all employees, including subs. It created an additional layer of liability for us. For example, any substitute that worked at least 30 hours a week under the Affordable Care Act was entitled to health care and any other benefits offered to other full-time employees, including retirement, health care, as I mentioned, and workers' compensation. That, in addition to other employment liabilities, that included if we had to remove any employees from a classroom, it was more cost-effective for us to employ them through a staffing agency. So move forward to 2015 on your timeline, and what you'll notice is that with the consideration of the Affordable Care Act, many districts, including School District 5, moved to shift to staffing agencies for the purpose of employment of substitutes. The benefits of this was that by using a staffing agency, we were able to shift some of our liability and responsibilities to that staffing agencies. They would take over a variety of items such as recruitment, selection, hiring, training employees, negotiating disputes, handling schedule conflicts, covering workers' compensation and liability insurance for employees, among other employment benefits. I'm going to ask Ms. Rawls to come to the podium to lead forward from 2015 to 2019 to talk about the process that was used as we decided on which staffing agency to move forward with.
Thank you, Dr. Turner. As you can see from the timeline from 2015 through 2019, several actions were taken to use Kelly Services to provide substitute teachers, from the fact that they were procured under an exemption in 2015 to where they went through formal solicitation in 2018, going through the bid process and the district awarding the contract to Kelly Services. I can tell you there have been several amendments to Amendment A, which is the rate of pay exhibit that is part of this contract. I want to say there's been as many as 4 amendments that have already been processed towards that contract. So the rates of pay have been added, different classifications to the original contract. So just wanted to make sure that that was brought forward. You can see the notes in 2019 for that. Moving to the next slide, as Dr. Turner referenced the ACA law, it requires us as employers to provide health care to employees that work on average more than 30 hours a week. So a cost to the district could be anywhere from $425 a month to $1,025 based on what type and level of coverage the employee were to choose. This was taken into account health care, dental, and nothing else. So that's pretty substantial liability when you're talking about the quantity of subs that would be needed to support this size of district. Also, I wanted to bring up that what the cost savings look like. Anywhere, a staffing agency charges anywhere from 27 to 30 or so % to provide subs to the district, whereas our current cost of fringe, when you look at FICA, Medicare, workers' comp, and retirement, and we do have to offer retirement to employees even if they work less than 30 hours. It's a law. If we employ someone, they have to be offered the option to be part of the South Carolina retirement system. You're looking at 32%. So it's a cost savings to us to provide the staffing services through a staffing agency versus doing it ourselves. So that just kind of looks at the numbers part of it. And I'm going to turn it back. Dr. Turner and I are going to tag team this one, so it's back to her turn.
Other considerations you notice, the last two bullets on the screen include grievance rights and district personnel. And again, it goes to who the employee belongs to. Is it an employee of the district or a staffing service? Because they would be responsible for dealing with that. In addition, when you look at district level personnel and researching other districts that handle substitutes through district processes, they actually employ certified staff because of the work required to recruit, hire, handle disciplinary issues, and it often requires work outside of the clock or outside of normal hours. We were asked how the staffing services work with the district. And in summary, there are two parts in terms of what Kelly Educational Services does and what district employees do to secure subs, and that's presented for you here. Ultimately, the district employee will go into a portal and request a sub, and on the other side, a Kelly Services employee will then book that available job. The staffing service or Kelly Service then notifies the district that they found a sub to fill that job, and that sub is directed to report to the district site in order to be directed by a supervisor to a duty station. The staffing service pays the sub, and the district in turn pays Kelly Services for that. The next question that we were asked is, what is the difference between what we call long-term certified subs versus daily substitutes? Long-term certified subs serve a benefit to students because these are certified teachers, many who have retired from roles as educators in classrooms or as have previously served in roles as administrators. These long-term certified educators have the ability of serving in a capacity much like a certified teacher. They can write lesson plans, they can administer and grade tests. Many times in the absence of a teacher for a longer term, they will participate in conferences. They have the ability to manage discipline at a higher level and participate in many activities that occur outside normal school hours. Daily substitutes are also very valuable to our schools. Not quite the experience that a certified teacher has, but they will come in and implement pre-written lesson plans. They will ensure our students are never left unattended, and they also report disciplinary problems to an administrator for assistance. Next is a review of rates of pay, and so I'm going to hand it back over to Ms. Rawls to address our rates of pay.
When we're looking at rates of pay, we have a couple of things that we need to make sure about. Number one, are we competitive with the Midlands? We're all looking for the same people. They will work for multiple districts at the time, so we have to make sure that we're competitive with our neighboring districts. And I can tell you that these rates of pay are very competitive with our neighbors. It's what we see across the book. I can tell you that many of our neighbors do have a rate for certified long-term subs, and it is the daily rate. So if we were to look at a $60 a day rate or a $65 a day rate, depending on what the level is. I guess with certification, we're looking at the $75. I think it would be a challenge for us to find those certified subs that would work for $75 a day versus a minimum, a first-year bachelor's teacher with no experience is, on our scale, is a little over $200 a day. So, I think that we have to look at that and see how can we make sure that we're providing the best for our students within the funding that we have available. So I think that's the biggest takeaway from this, but these are our current rates. This is Amendment A to the contract. And now Ms. Story will be leading the...
Good evening, Chair Hammond, board members, Dr. Melton. It's good to be here tonight. I'm so glad I finally get to speak. I've been sitting here for a really long time. I've just been dying to talk to y'all. Us attorneys can't stand to be quiet. So I want to thank both Dr. Turner and Ms. Rawls. They did a fantastic job, and they really put a lot of thought into this and providing information. And we are going to be prepared to answer all of your questions tonight, number one. I also want to thank Molly Flynn from my office. She has been helping us put together some of this information, so I thank you, Molly, as well. So there are two big questions that came out of this, and I think that's why we have a concern and why we're here tonight. Number one, was the procurement process sound for the selection of this company, Kelly Services? And number two, does the current contract and our practice comply with what the contract says with regard to payment of those long-term subs, with regard to those long-term sub rates? So if we can focus on these two questions, I think we'll get ahead of ourselves and try to get to where we need to be, which are our options and what you guys need to consider in terms of moving forward with this service, with a different service, or going in a different direction. So with regard to the procurement process, you all have seen a legal opinion provided by Mr. John Regal's office with regard to that. I cannot speak to that directly because that's not my legal opinion, but you have that. If you have additional information or you have questions about that, I'm happy to try to entertain that at a later point tonight. And again, if the board would like to have more information raised about that or has additional information that would warrant another opinion, that's also fine. You have that discretion, so you can decide what you want to do with regard to that. And I believe the earlier slide with regard to the timeline touched on the procurement piece about the exemption with regard to Kelly's initial selection before the procurement process was followed. So secondly, and I think this is really the big question here, and I see Ms. Huddle over there taking a lot of notes, so I'm expecting some questions from you, Ms. Huddle. We have to worry about now whether or not our practice to pay these long-term subs complies with the contract as it's written. And so from our review, and we know this, we have a board policy that speaks to what we are paying our long-term subs should they be our employees, okay? Now, this takes it out of a context a little bit because when we're talking about paying Kelly Services employees, they are just that, Kelly Services employees. But Ms. Rawls and Dr. Turner have told you guys why we had that policy to begin with in 2009. And it's important, I think, also for you to know that when Kelly came and presented to the school district back in, 2014, ladies, 2015, there were a number of other school districts that it was servicing at that time, and 3 of them, based on our research, had a similar policy. That was Fairfield, Kershaw, and Lexington, too. So we do know that Kelly was aware of that at that time, and it's important because for competition services and reasons, you guys want to make sure these folks are getting paid, so they come here and they do teach our kids. We want quality education. It's all about the students at the end of the day. Personally, I'll briefly share a story with you from when I was in high school, and of course this was not in Lexington 5. I'm from the great city of Sherall, South Carolina. Chesterfield County is my home, and when I was in high school, I think we offered 3 AP classes, so I'm just saying y'all have some great stuff here in Lexington 5. Not saying anything negative about my former district, which was many years ago. Having said that, when I was in my AP Calculus class, my junior year of high school, our professor or teacher went out unexpectedly on an extended medical leave, and it was very, very challenging for the administration at my high school to find a replacement teacher who could serve in a long-term capacity, because can you imagine teaching high school seniors AP Calculus on a daily basis if you don't have that certification experience, if you don't have any idea how to implement lesson plans, much less create them. And I was very fortunate that the district was able to find someone in that long-term capacity who stayed with it. Happily for her, she really taught herself some of those AP Calculus things, and so I think our class overall did much better than it would have. But I think that's important because at the end of the day right now, our conversation, y'all have alluded to this earlier with the ESSER funding, We've got COVID-related regression issues that we're already addressing, and we're looking to address. Dr. Slatton talked about that earlier. And so when you're talking about the necessity of bringing in a long-term sub, someone who has that experience, who's certified, is more of a necessity now than it ever has been. And that has definitely been a discussion from both personnel and finance. So, having said that, this does create an issue, and y'all have posed it very well, because we have this policy that talks about district employees, but these folks are not district employees. So how do we make that work, okay? We've got several options, but the one that's being recommended tonight for your consideration, and I fully support it, concerns two things. It's sort of a blend of various options. So the first thing would be to make an amendment to Exhibit A, which is the cost structure that's set out, that specifies what we want to pay these long-term subs based on that policy to stay competitive with the Midlands area, and also just make Kelly aware that that's what we're going to be doing moving forward. But you guys would also ratify what has been paid in the past with regard to that. So everything is sort of shored up, if you will, and we can move forward in that direction. My other piece of advice at this point would also be to amend your current G policy to account for the fact the district is now using a staffing service. So they're not district employees anymore. They are staffing service employees. And in fact, we were doing some research. Lexington 2, Ms. Rawls' former stomping grounds, has that very same policy. It essentially mirrors exactly what you guys have, but talks, instead of being district employees, they being staffing support service employees. So I think the blend of those two things is important, and that is what the recommendation is. However, the question would bear then, what are our other options if we don't like this, if we don't want to do this? Why is this being recommended? So there are a variety of options. The first one that seems to make sense, if you don't want to do either of these things, would be to stop paying those long-term subs at that higher daily rate, because the policy doesn't really apply to them. They aren't district employees, right? And I think this was already touched upon earlier, that this may be problematic in terms of competition, keeping those subs engaged here in our district, which would have a devastating impact on our kids, right? So we would like to... that is an option. We could certainly not move forward with that anymore, but I think that that's going to be something you would have to address at some point, one way or the other. Just personally, that's my opinion about that. Another option would be is that you guys could decide that you don't want to continue on moving forward with Kelly Services, and you have to provide a 30-day cancellation for termination there, and we can talk about that, because once you do that, if that's what you choose to do, which is certainly within the board's purview, you had then two options, right? Your first option would be potentially to open up the procurement process to have another staffing service come in, multiple services come in and bid on that process and make a new decision about moving forward with some other staffing service, which you have to consider the procurement timelines. We're here at the tail end of the school year. We've got 38 days left. So if you provide 30 days notice, let's say for tonight, for example, you're going to have a problem with the very end of the school year trying to fill those positions, because there's no way we can get that done in procurement within 38 days, right? And I will let Ms. Rawls speak to that in a moment. I don't think you can get that done by the beginning of next school year, practically speaking. So that is an issue. The second thing you could do is you could cancel this contract and you could bring it back in-house, sort of like we had the sub-finder back, many, many years ago. And there are other issues with that as well, because, again, we're going to have to get all of this stuff situated by the end of this school year, if not the beginning of next school year. You guys are looking at having to hire staff members permanently to manage that. You're going to have to implement and pay for a software system that can manage the sub-finder, or the whatever process you use to get the subs kind of rolling in and out. And you're going to have to deal with the cost side of that with regard to these fringe benefits, insurance, workers' comp, those sorts of things, retirement. And so that's why those numbers are provided to you, because it is a cost-effective thing moving forward with the staffing service, generally speaking. But that's not the theme here. The theme is really what's the best for our kids, right? And so I think in talking about this recommendation, we've discussed why paying long-term subs that higher rate is important, because we want to keep them here. We want them to be competitive with our other local districts, but our kids need them. And secondly, in terms of what we're looking forward ahead, there's no way all of this can get done before the end of this school year. Number one, it's just not feasibly possible. But number two, if we do, we have a lot of work ahead of us in the next few months trying to get this wrapped up. So this is why this recommendation is being made. But there are these other avenues if those are things you guys want to pursue as a board, and that's why they're being presented as well. I would just say sort of here in summary, and I will invite Ms. Rawls and Dr. Turner back to the podium so we can all answer questions together. The thing with this is, and in looking at it from my perspective, in applying our current board policy to the Kelly subs, I don't believe there was any sort of there was no reason that was done inappropriately. It was done for the right reason, to keep these subs engaged here. And so that's important to know, because there's no reason the district doesn't benefit, monetarily from paying those people that additional money, right? And then, the other aspect here is considering how we just move forward with that and how we change that for the future so that this isn't an issue. You've raised it, it's been brought to our attention, and we're here to fix it. And so this is why this recommendation is being made. So I will invite these ladies back up here, and we are happy to answer any questions you all have with relation to this issue and this discussion.
I have several questions, but I'll start with the recommendations that you had. Can we, as far as the order that we do them in and the timing, could we ratify it tonight, and if we decide to go the route of the amendment, since that could be tied into policy and all that, could we ratify tonight but make the amendment before the start of the next school year?
Absolutely, and I think in terms of the exhibit and making those changes, we want to include the actual numbers. I think that would be the best practice, correct, Ms. Rawls? I mean, you can give us some more information about how specifically we ought to do that, but the policy itself, we already have a draft of what we would propose the new policy to be, so y'all could start that at your next board meeting on May the 10th in terms of reading for that, so that would be easy to fix. But what are your thoughts about getting the ratification taken care of and moving forward with that?
We can do it two ways, I think. Like Ashley said, we can have the amendment ready for the next board meeting. You could approve the amendment and then ratify what has already happened in accordance with that amendment. Legally, I don't know if we need the amendment approved first before the ratification, or if they just vote to approve the way it has happened in the past and then provide the amendment. So
that's my question, is legally, does it matter what order that we do these in?
I don't think it really matters, but what I would be concerned about if I were sitting in your seat is what those numbers look like. Like, I would want to know what the numbers are before I actually voted on that, if it were me. And so I think doing it all together makes better sense, but y'all can do it however you want to.
Ms. Hammond, may I ask one other question? It's a co-employment question. If we're paying two people that are not teachers through this, and they're basically full-time 5 days a week, and we've been doing so for a long time. And I don't know if they can drive a district car or not, so I have kind of a partner question. Is that an issue? Is that an issue, paying someone 5 days a week for a very long time? And if so, is it okay for them to use equipment, cars and vehicles?
So some of this is covered in the actual contract with Kelly. It specifies what some of these, their employees can and can't do pursuant to our policy, pursuant to equipment and those sorts of things. Like, we have certain guarantees we have to provide in terms of a safe working environment, that sort of thing. But, this all boils down to the bigger legal question about what is an independent contractor and what is an employee. And that is the question that we are all going to be fighting for the rest of our lives as long as we're using staffing services. I'll say generally, and I think I didn't count the number of times Dr. Turner used the word liability, but we deal with this on a daily basis, which is probably why I'm standing here tonight. It's not for discussion tonight about whether or not these folks are independent contractors or employees, because the way the contract specifies, they are Kelly employees and not school district employees. And we can continue paying them in that long-term sub through Kelly to continue in that regard. All of these things are always up for legal challenge and debate at any time. And so we actually have to engage with Kelly about this when we're dealing with employment matters that stem over into our lane. When a Kelly employee, for example, brings a charge of discrimination, names both the district and Kelly, right? But we still have this contract that's very solid that we rely on. And also the practices. Kelly recruits, hires, supervises, trains. They do a lot of that stuff that we are not doing, which would be the traditional role of the employer. So with regard to those long-term folks, even though they're working 5 days a week, that doesn't matter because they're still going through Kelly. They're going through all of those channels and processes that are outlined in the contract. And that would be the legal position that I would take.
Mr. Lovelace.
Are we not opening ourselves up to some kind of lawsuit?
How do you mean? Be specific with me, because I can see lawsuits all day long.
Well, you've got some employees that have been paid more than others. How are you going to determine where some Kelly Services people that are paid more than others for the same service? How are we going to determine what is a fair rate of pay for those that you've been paying a lot more than the ones that are on the lower end of the scale?
So it's my understanding, based on the policy, that a lot of this has to do with certification years of experience, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong about that. But with regard to litigation, here's what I'll generally say, and I think any lawyer would tell you this. You're open to litigation because you run and operate a business with employees, and that is either with regard to employees or with students or whatever the case may be. Us standing here tonight, we can have some liability and somebody can file a lawsuit because that's how America is. We're a litigious society. But to back to your question about how can we justify paying these folks a higher rate versus other people, and if we ratify that, are we opening ourselves up? Well, y'all would be looking at this across the board, so you're not picking out people for protected status reasons such as race, national origin, religion, things that would be covered under federal laws that would be protected. You're doing this all across the board, so you're looking at any of those things. That's not a consideration. You're looking at their qualifications. To your point, though, Mr. Lovelace, anybody can bring a lawsuit at any time, and we have to be able to defend it.
I realize that, but
Yes.
what I'm asking you is that we have people in our district office that have been working in there as long-term employees of a vendor, using company or district vehicles with liability out there that have just, if you tell me right now, if somebody were to run into one of those vehicles, would Kelly Services pay for the liability insurance on that? I mean, aren't we trying to ease around a problem that, each one of these people has different qualifications. Each one of those people that was on that list that you gave, some of them may be more qualified than the ones that we're paying more. How do we know that? And what are we going to do individually? We're just going to go back there and look at each individual? I mean, I don't understand the basis for what you're trying to say in ratification.
So the purpose of ratifying it would be that we have already expended these funds with regard to these long-term subs based on our GCG policy. And that GCG policy speaks to employees, not to Kelly Services. So we're ratifying the practice that we have had over the last, I don't know how many years, Dr. Turner, of paying these people this higher rate based on those qualifications. With regard to your question about the vehicle liability, just example, that's a great hypothetical. And if we were to be sued, we probably would be sued along with Kelly Services, and that would be something that we would duke out based on the contract and how it's written with regard to liability and indemnification, which is contained in that contract. I hope that answers your question. Who else?
Ms. Gardner, and then Ms. Hines.
Is there a provision in the contract? And apparently there's not, because there's not even a pay scale for long-term subs. I think one of the things that I am concerned about is that we are aware of certain, because of what's going on with our current situation with COVID and their shortages, that we have quite a few long-term substitutes getting paid their long-term rate when they're just being a certified sub for the day. Is there a way for us to ratify it to make sure that we're paying it for the right reason, as opposed to just this person, we want this person to come back and to sit in this classroom because this person does a great job monitoring this classroom, and we're going to pay him his long-term sub pay, even though he's not technically teaching, he's not going to be in a same classroom for more than 1 or 2 days, or if he is, he's not teaching because the teacher's teaching remotely for whatever reason. Could we add that to the ratification so that we make sure, and on top of that, can we make sure that can we request as a board to increase the sub pay too, because it's been the same I used to substitute in this school district, and it was too low 10 years ago, and it hasn't changed, I don't know for how long. It's wrong, it needs to be higher. And so those are my questions. Can we put those kind of things in the ratification?
Absolutely. I mean, you guys can put whatever in there suits your needs. And I also used to sub in Chesterfield County, and it was $25 an hour back in the day. So I agree with you. I think our teachers over everybody is underpaid. But I think you guys need to decide exactly if that's one thing, if you want to raise the pay overall, what that needs to look like and the financial implications of that. And my advice would be to provide some examples of that for Ms. Raw so she can run those numbers and tell you what that financial impact looks like because of the upcharge and that sort of thing. But with regard to classifying what the definition of that long-term sub is, that needs to track whatever your policy is going to say. So it's very clear, it's evident. So for example, I think the current policy reads, and I think y'all were provided this back in March, 10 consecutive days. Is that right? 10 consecutive days in the classroom. And so, I mean, obviously that would have been, the theory about that and why we would have done that would have been, someone's going out maternity leave, they're planning to have the same long-term sub come in for those 3 months they're going to be out, right? Or if I have hip surgery and I'm going to be out for 8 weeks, it's the same person. So you've got that continuity in supervision and instruction. So I think that that can be made clear in the exhibit with the amendment, absolutely. And I think you should, especially if you're going to amend your policy, it ought to make sense. They ought to work together.
Ms. Hammond, I'm curious, because of the hour that it is and because of where we are on the agenda, we may be premature in making these suggestions to the board. So perhaps the officers can work with me as to how we could follow up to give this more time for discussion, because I know that there's some things on the agenda that we have coming up, and in no way am I trying to delay the needs that the staff and Ms. Story are recommending, but I'm concerned about the hour and the content still to cover, to include public participation.
Yes, I appreciate that. We maybe should have made a motion to have moved that to earlier. If this would suit the board, I like that information. We could come back with more discussion with it, but we can bring something back concrete from y'all's, the points you've made, because we do have some action agendas that Dr. Melton needs done. We appreciate this hard work, and we do know that subs are not paid enough, and that might be something we look at that helps our students, because we may get more quality people. And I think the question is not so much not paying somebody as much as $400 or $500 a day, and then somebody gets 75. We understand the certified, but if it's something we need to look at, let's talk with Dr. Melton and come back with it something in concrete. Is that good?
Absolutely, and I just would like to echo that any ideas or suggestions y'all have, I mean, this is the ideal time to have those discussions with Kelly, because this is a negotiating time, so for next school year. So absolutely, y'all's timing couldn't be more impeccable.
Thank you.
Ms. Hammond, could we make a motion on that? I mean, I'd just like to move that the administration present a proposed amendment to the existing contract with Kelly Services at our next board meeting.
And there's a second from Ms. Gardner, and I think we've discussed it enough. Is there a vote to put that on the agenda after talking with Dr. Melton? Okay, and that's 6. Thank you. All right, let's go to Synergistic Report Energy Conservation Program.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Bimbo is going to lead this one for us. This is in response to some questions from board members and to make sure that the board is aware of efforts going on in School District 5. Mr. Bimbo.
Thank you, Chair Hammond, board members, Dr. Melton. It's my privilege tonight to bring to you our conservation partner, Synergistics, tonight. We have Mr. Butch Collier, Mr. Tony Cox, Mr. Nathan Twigg, and Ms. Jasmine Taylor. They're here to talk about the ways that we conserve energy in District 5 and ways that we save money to put money back in the classroom. I'll ask Mr. Butch Collier and Mr. Tony Cox to come up and give a brief presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. Tony Cox and I are honored to share some great news, as Synergistic is proud to be partners with this school district and would like to recognize your accomplishments. School District 5 has substantially reduced their energy usage and their carbon footprint the last 3 years, as well as providing healthy and safe buildings during these trying times. Our partnership has reduced energy usage through our proven behavior-based techniques rooted in building a culture of sustainability and optimizing buildings without having to buy new equipment. Since the performance year started in March of 2018 through January of 2021, or 35 months into the program, our partnership has reduced energy costs by 15%, or roughly $2.1 million. Energy usage is measured in BTUs. Energy use per square foot currently right now for Lexington 5 is 27.6, or 22% decrease from the base year. Just to give you some idea, the regional average of our clients, which includes the Carolinas, Tennessee, and Georgia, is 35.1. So with you being at 27.6, you can see that you are well below the regional average regarding energy usage in your buildings. So you are to be congratulated for a job well done. Our partnership uses an industry standard method to measure progress on every meter every month. And with it, we can compare your expected energy costs during this time, which would be $14.4 million, to what you actually paid in energy costs, which was $12.3. At the heart of this success is our energy specialists, Jasmine Taylor and Nathan Twigg, if they would just stand up right there. These people are teaming with your school faculty and facilities staff, trained by our engineers and experts, and they are literally in your buildings at all hours of the day, night, and the weekend, trying to find energy conservation measurements to bring you these results. As we continue our partnership, our game plan, of course, includes continuous improvement and gaining School District 5 the recognition it deserves. I would like to now turn it over to Tony Cox to present an award and recognize.
Thank you very much. Tonight we celebrate by recognizing the true team here. You, the school board, the community for its support, the maintenance staff for its execution, your custodial professionals who are in the buildings late at night, all District 5 faculty and staff, as a matter of fact, but especially Mr. Todd Bedenbaugh, Mr. Clay Cannon, and Dr. Christina Melton for their insightful leadership for this effort. And so it gives me great pleasure tonight to present this award, our Energy Excellence Award, to School District 5 of Lexington and Richland counties.
We need a picture of that.
And we do have
Where's
a
Ms.
rather
Cox?
large check to show you.
Ms. Hammond, that completes the report. If there's any questions regarding that informational item, I'd like to echo the appreciation for the staff and thank you for being so deliberate to make sure you pointed out the number of different stakeholders that have been involved with this success. So Ms. Hammond will receive any questions.
Okay, any questions? Any?
I'd just like to know what, is there a split in savings between the district and you guys? I mean, how do you
Yes, sir. What we do is whatever the savings is, it's a 50-50 split. So you keep half of it and then we get half of it. Yes, sir.
So, okay, is this behavioral, type modification, is that what you're aiming at here?
Yes, sir. We're not we're not a company that sells you equipment. We don't sell LED lighting or get you to pay for anything in order to get that savings. It's a matter of changing the culture. We want to create an energy culture in the staff, in the school buildings, and we want to make sure that we optimize your buildings.
Okay, what would you say the cost to the district has been for what it's put into this process? I know you say we saved $2.144 million, but what did we pay to get to that point? What did the district, it paid employees, it paid office space, it paid, what else did it do?
No, so we pay for the employees. Those energy specialists right there, they're paid by us. So basically the only thing, again, that it cost you was the 50% split. It doesn't cost you anything else.
So we're not writing you a check every month?
Sir?
So the district doesn't write you guys a check every month?
They do write us a check every single month. What happens is every time we get the bills in, the bills are entered in a software program called Energy Cap. It's not our program, it's an outside company, and that calculates the savings, and then that savings is sent to you in an invoice on a monthly basis, and then whatever that savings is for that particular month, then you pay 50% of it to us. Yes, sir.
Mr. Hogan.
And if we can go back to the slide to show the graph for the energy use history, how are we quantifying how much energy we've saved? If I'm looking at the graph, it looks like a substantial dip right around the time we shut schools down. So are we comparing that to what our energy was May of 2019 and in 2020?
So very, very good observation. So as you can see, kind of when the program first started, and then we have a continual decrease, and then you're right, about the time that COVID started and students were out of school, there was a dramatic increase. So this EUI reduction is a raw number there, and so we did not want to take credit for something that we didn't do. It's an event, it's a pandemic, it happened. You changed the way that school was operated. So what we did is we made an adjustment so that we really didn't take 22%. Ours was like at 15% cost avoidance. So that's how we took care of that.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Huddle?
So everything's measured from the base year, right?
Yes, ma'am.
What would your estimate be of how much elasticity is left? How much more can we gain given current technologies?
So as far as what we can do or what you could do?
Both.
So obviously, I know there's a big thing about LED lighting, for example. Obviously, it's not something that we do, but it is something that a lot of school districts look at. Obviously, LED lighting will reduce your energy. In fact, if you were to do that like tomorrow, your energy bills would go down. Again, that's something that we didn't do, so we would not take credit for that. So anything that you do equipment-wise, we don't necessarily do. Our major thing is to try to find opportunities like this time of night when the buildings are closed and schools have the lights left on, or there's HVAC running that shouldn't be running at a certain temperature. So those are the things that we continuously look at. Obviously, as we go along, those opportunities become much narrower. That is correct.
I'm going to move us along. We appreciate that, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Thank y'all very much.